So a guy who works for Dennis Prager, I know, like that's the punchline right there. Anyway, a guy who works for Dennis Prager makes a video about the alt-right. Oh, this is going to be wonderful. So let's just get right in.
So, in the alt-right's view, the moral ideals of the American founders, like all men are created equal, are naive and misguided.
What an annoying and tedious thing to respond to. The phrase, all men are created equal. Like, whatever. Maybe that means under the law, but who cares? Obviously, they don't mean all men are created equally tall or equally intelligent or strong. So it clearly means something very contextual. It's not part of the formal legal document, it's part of the preamble. So let's just skip this whole song and dance and get into what this is really about. The very first Immigration Act in the US was that citizens must be white men of good character. And yes, this included Irish and Italians. White back then meant the same thing as it does today. As recently as 1923, the United States retroactively revoked the citizenship of some 20,000 Indian Americans after the courts ruled they were not white. Before 1776, 8 of the 13 original colonies had laws prohibiting whites intermarrying with blacks or Amerindians. And the Founding Fathers, the people who wrote the Constitution, clearly supported these laws, or at least didn't do anything to stop it. So yes, anti-race mixing laws are constitutional. The Supreme Courts just went rogue 180 years later. Here are some interesting quotes from Thomas Jefferson on this. Quote, "The improvement of the blacks in body and mind, in the first instance of their mixture with the whites, has been observed by everyone, and proves that their inferiority is not the effect merely of their condition of life. We know that among the Romans, about the Augustan age especially, the condition of their slaves was much more deplorable than that of the blacks on the continent of America. Yet notwithstanding these and other discouraging circumstances among the Romans, their slaves were often their rarest artists. They excelled too in science, insomuch as to be usually employed as tutors to their masters' children. Epictetus, Terence, and Phaedrus were slaves, but they were of the race of whites. It is not their condition then, but nature, which has produced the distinction. Among the Romans, emancipation required but one effort. The slave, when made free, might mix with without staining the blood of his master. But with us a second is necessary, unknown to history. When freed, he is to be removed beyond the reach of mixture." And there's more than just Jefferson. I'll plug my own video, Conceived in White Nationalism, showing that white nationalism was the norm for most of the United States' history, and the recent trouble stems from the deviation from white nationalism that occurred in the 1960s. Of course, it wasn't called white nationalism, it wasn't called anything, it wasn't the product of some culture or conditioning, it's just how people felt, thought, and acted. It's just normal sentiment and thought. That's why it has to be suppressed today and why it will never go away.
America's success, in their view, is a product of race and geography, or as the alt-right likes to put it, of blood and soil.
No, what's actually happening here is you are doing this autistic thing where you separate people from ideas. The founders' ideas about how to manage a country, that is the blood and soil. The people and the values are enmeshed. Now, I go a little bit further and I say that this is mostly a result of direct and indirect genetic influences. But even if you think that genes don't exist and all these group differences in voting and political views are entirely cultural or whatever, well, you know, what you call conservatism right now, it's a kind of de facto white nationalism. We can look at the electoral results here and we can see that if you want to be competitive electorally, you need whites, and that's just a brute fact. Also, only white people consistently support small government and free speech. If you want small government, by whatever these people mean when they say that, you need whites. And you can imagine that one day you'll get the Hispanics on your side, and that's nice. You've been saying that since Reagan's amnesty turned California into a Democrat state, but until then, you have to realize that it's whites who support you, and you should do everything you can to limit the voting power of non-whites and increase the voting power of whites.
Let me try to untangle this. Both the left and the alt-right are obsessed with race and identity politics, the belief that a person's value is linked to their racial heritage. The left wants special status for racial and ethnic minorities. The alt-right wants special status for the racial and ethnic majority.
Okay, I'm going to make this so simple that even a Pragertard can understand this. You have two countries, country A and country B. Country A says blood and soil, country B says values. So people from country A move to country B. Why? Because country B doesn't care about blood and soil, they care about values, so anybody can come in. So now the people from country A have 100% 100% control of country A plus 20% control of country B, reducing the ability of the people in country B to enforce their values. And so the people who say blood and soil, they get more blood and soil and more expression of their values because they have complete control of where they came from and partial control of the places they go to. When they move to country B, they are not persuaded. As we see with the Hispanics and the Asians, they are not persuaded to adopt the values of the white population in the United States. This simplistic diagram does accurately reflect what has actually happened with Asian and Hispanic immigrants in the United States. And you say special status, whatever. For whites, it's about wanting independence and self-determination. What you call the left wants is to attach brown leeches on a white civilization. To equate the two is very silly, and it's actually just this kind of cringy middleman bullshit. They're not analogous at all. China is for the Chinese, blood and soil. And you clowns say, hey, let's not have blood and soil. Let's have open borders because ideas are all that matters. And so now a Chinaman has access to both China and the United States, and white Americans only have access to the United States, which is increasingly being dominated by the other groups coming in. Look, it's okay to have your principles, but when the things you do for your principles aren't being reciprocated by others, you're not actually living by your principles. You're just being taken advantage of, and worse yet, you're demanding that others, that people like me, that people who are aware of the situation, be taken advantage of along with you. In practice, you're not actually against blood and soil in some general sense. You're only against blood and soil for white people. That's the result of what you're actually doing.
My God, I shall cherish this forever. I say, Opie, I'll trade you this baseball for your souvenir bat.
Sure.
What did you learn?
Since America, according to the alt-right, was founded by white Europeans and was built by white Europeans, it should belong to white Europeans.
Yeah, not according to, was. The United States was built by white ingenuity and white labor. Black labor was mostly in the backwater South, and they picked cotton and made a few white people there very rich for a short period of time, and whatever trinkets of wealth trickled from the plantations to industry, that was more than offset by the cost of the Civil War.
That brings us to the most glaring similarity between the alt-right and the left: their disdain for the individual. The constant focus of both the left and the alt-right on group identity means that they downplay the value of the individual. This stands in stark opposition to the fundamental American value, which conservatives have long championed, that places the individual, not the collective, at the center of society.
Okay, everyone values the individual, and individuals want to live in nice societies. I, as an individual, want to live in an all-white country as the founders intended. Forcing me to be ruled by blacks and Arabs and tacos won't enhance my individualism, and it won't do anything for whatever your conservative values are supposed to be. These people you call leftists, they would say that the individual cannot truly be autonomous if he is market dominated by others. So in a substantive, robust sense, to be autonomous as an individual, you need economic, legal protections and a living wage. That's what they'll say. And since these practices will reduce the competitive of your economy relative to other countries that don't do those things, you need to erect tariffs on countries that don't have worker protections, right? So it's really complicated, right? But they're going to say, therefore, individualism in a substantive way, and you're just for individualism in a very trivial, way that doesn't actually reflect reality. That's what they'll say. It's complicated. Everyone says they're for individualism, and there's a big argument as to what that really means and how to apply it. You're not the only one who says he's for individualism. Everyone argues what individualism really means in practice, okay? It's complicated, right? It's these you don't own these buzz phrases.
The pioneer spirit, entrepreneurial drive, the acceptance of personal responsibility. These are uniquely American ideas, uniquely conservative ideas, but they mean little, if anything, to the alternatives to conservatism, the left and the alt-right.
Literally everyone supports these words. There is debate on what these words really mean, what constitutes responsibility, etc. Like, it's more complicated than this. These are just platitudes. These don't mean anything when you say them. Everyone likes the word freedom, and leftists will say that you are anti-freedom. I'll say that you're anti-freedom because all you really want, or at least the results of all that you really want, if enacted, is just going to turn more states into California, right? It's just going to be me being told what to do by a bunch of brown people and cat ladies. Okay, that's the actual result of your policies and your political strategies enacted. that has been the result of your policies and strategies enacted. So in effect, I view you as anti-freedom, whatever your intentions may be. So saying all these happy words, right, it doesn't mean anything. Everyone says they're for responsibility. Everyone says they're for freedom. Everyone says they're for the individual, okay? They don't mean anything. The world is more complicated than this, all right? This isn't Republican kindergarten class, all right? Now, we shouldn't countersignal the Pragertards too hard here because they are suing Google to try to force Google to abide by First Amendment protections. And this is like the most important thing, okay? Trump doesn't understand this because he's an old man, and Dennis Prager probably wouldn't understand this if he didn't do the Prager University thing. So there may actually be something good that comes from the Prager University thing, that it may actually get Google off our asses. And it's good. It's good that the Pragertards aren't being libertarian autists about this. They're not saying, well, you could just form your own social network if you don't like it. No, they understand the reality of natural monopolies and network effects. But a lot of the things that the Pragertards say about the left and the alt-right have in common is really just stupid that they do that normal people don't. For example, this radical separation of people from beliefs, that's a kind of tactical autism that only libertarians and autiste conservatives do, right? It's something stupid that you do. It's something unique to you. Yeah, sure. Everyone else is going to be similar in the sense that they don't do this, okay? And so the left and the alt-right are going to have that in common, I guess. But no, that's a stupid way to look at it. You're just kind of dumb. Okay, you're just kind of uniquely dumb. Or like people who say Islam is a religion, not a race. No, Islam is kind of a race. There is kind of a race of Islam, right? These things aren't separate. Stop being a dipshit. Conservatism is also kind of a race. Yes, there's non-white conservatives, and you love parading them around wherever you can show them off. But really, conservatism is the implicit white ethno-religion, with conservative Christianity being part of this white ethno-religion, a certain kind of Christianity, right? That's different from the Christianity of Brazil. Or saying the founders weren't white nationalists when they clearly were. Yeah, sure, both the left and the alt-right point out that the founders wanted a white-only country. The left says, oh, that's terrible, we need to move away from the founders' intent. We say, no, the founders' intent is good, and this is a good thing about it. Now, you don't. You say, oh, they weren't white nationalists, right? And that's just because you're stupid and wrong, and it's because you have a belief system that is trying to, on the one hand, be observant to, like, liberalism from the 1970s, like liberal pieties from the 1970s, while at the same time claiming to be strict adherents to founders' intent. Well, no. The founders were white nationalists, so shit or get off the pot. What we know for sure is that conservatives don't know how to change the proportion of Hispanics that vote Republican. We've tried this thing where ideas are divorced from race for 35 years now, since Reagan, and it's failed. It turned California blue. This isn't theory anymore. And the burden is on you to prove that you can and will make these brown people vote Republican. Blood and soil and ideas, these are enmeshed. They are. Whether it's genetic or otherwise, the brute fact is they are enmeshed. Your radical separation of the two, it's not self-evident. It's not some obvious thing that you do. It's something that you have to be ideologically conditioned to do to separate people from belief. Okay? It deviates from founders' intent, and you've been trying it for 35 years, and you're losing states because of it. We weren't here at the beginning of this when the GOP had this great new plan to win over brown people, so we're not attached to it in the bitter hope that it will work. We just see it now, all at once, as it is, as a complete failure, and that's why the alt-right tends to be younger than Pragertards. So if you want free speech and free markets, you need whites. That's just a fact. Right? This is not a debate point. We're not debating this. That's just a fact right now. If you focus on ideas to the exclusion of blood and soil, well, you're going to lose your blood, you're going to lose your soil, and you're going to lose your ideas. Okay? The Democrats are going to take over California. You're going to get nothing, which is precisely what is happening now. And this is why when someone says George Bush or Dennis Prager, it's a punchline. You don't even need a setup, because as soon as someone says Dennis Prager, right, they think of some holier-than-thou Reagan throwback telling us how people who disagree with him are against freedom and against responsibility.